A shadow momentarily blocked the light streaming in through the doorframe. Ernest Dowson looked up to see the outline of a diminutive man in a rumpled uniform. He couldn't tell if it was regulation uniform or just a khaki suit, but what he could divine was the man seemed half amused, half embarrassed to be interrupting the operations of the office. Dowson would later remember that impetuous grin as well as the man himself. At that moment, however, he just thought, whoever can this extraordinary pipsqueak be? The man turned out to be Thomas Edward Lawrence. He was part of a team enlisted by the British government to survey the area in anticipation of possible future enemy action against Egypt. Lawrence had spent much time in the region and spoke Arabic and several dialects used by the local populace. In 1909, he made a personal pilgrimage to Palestine and Syria to survey Crusader castles. He used the notes and sketches he wrote and drew on that trip to write a thesis for his final history examinations at Oxford University. He returned in 1911 to work on the British Museum's archaeological excavations at Carchemish, Syria, under the tutelage of David Hogarth. During his last trip to Carchemish, he had worked with C. Leonard Woolley, who described Lawrence as impish and disdainful of work he felt could be done differently and more efficiently. What impressed Woolley was Lawrence's ability to work with the locals on the dig. His language skills were buttressed by his empathy for the indigenous peoples. Sometimes, at the expense of the dig, he would sit for hours with the workers and talk about customs or language. Lawrence's first foray into intelligence work began shortly thereafter. In December 1913, Captain Stuart Francis Newcomb, Royal Engineers, was tasked to conduct a survey of Palestine near Beersheba, an area that was mostly unknown to British mapmakers. Newcomb was an experienced military engineer and adventurer, and had already surveyed railway routes in Abyssinia, Sudan, and Egypt. Ostensibly, the survey was for archaeological purposes and conducted under the auspices of the Palestinian Exploration Fund, PEF, in the northern Sinai and southern Negev deserts. In reality, however, the survey was to service War Office needs for up-to-date maps of the region. They would be critical to the defence of the Suez Canal. The inclusion of Woolley and Lawrence in the expedition lent a fig leaf of cover that actually resulted in a well-respected study called The Wilderness of Zin, published by the PEF as its annual for 1914-15. Lawrence wrote in a letter home that he and Woolley, were meant to be red herrings for what was basically a political job.